And we are so excited to be here today to talk about our new product called Puppet Discovery. Before we jump into that, just a little bit about who are these guys? So this is about I think my 4th month at Puppet, actually. So I'm a relative newbie. Please treat me kindly. But before that, I spent 5+ years working upstream OpenStack, mostly around monitoring, management, logging, all the fun stuff to try and make it operational. And before that, I spent 7 years building software-defined systems for the Boeing 787 Dreamliner. So, I guess you can say that I've always worked in clouds, haha, but today I'm here to share with you a brand new product from Puppet that I hope you're going to love.
My name is Canis, product manager on the Discovery team. I have been in Puppet for about a year and a half. And before that, I worked on the Azure Compute team. And so I'm slightly responsible for the proliferation of VM sizes there, as well as a number of debugging features, all of which you probably curse at night whenever those VMs break. But now I'm here. No correlation. Yeah, that's a little bit about me. All
right, thanks. So before we get started, little questions for everyone. How many people are using public infrastructure? Show of hands. OK. How many people are using containers? Awesome. Awesome. Well, then this is probably not anything new for you. We're in the age of resource proliferation. Gartner says there's 8 billion connected devices this year alone. I think there's more. And they say there's going to be 21 billion connected devices by 2020, which is a 26% year-over-year growth. It's pretty crazy. As we know, they're all running across heterogeneous infrastructure sets, hybrid clouds, on-prem data centers, containers, VMs, servers. And as I talk to most of you, and in my past life, a lot of the people who ran the large data centers around the world, I always would ask this question. Do you know what you're running? Do you know what you have? Half the people say, yep, I know what I got. I know it all. I've got this CMDB system that I have invested in over the last 20 years, and it tells me everything. All right, maybe not half. Others say, yeah, I kind of know. I know what's important. I know what's running in prod. I don't know what devs are doing, but that's not a big deal. But then you start to say, no, really, do you know what's running on those resources? Do you know what users and packages and groups are on those things? Do you know who made those changes? What about that container that you spun up for 5 minutes and then killed and then basically had to go get an auditor or approve an audit compliance? And then people say, yeah, maybe I don't know what's running everywhere. So we want to help with that problem. But that's not the only problem. As we all know, myself included lately, there's been a lot of data breaches. This graphic stuck out at me recently, and I thought it was interesting to share, that over the last 12 years, there's been 5,000+ data breaches. And for anyone who knows, it's self-reported, so the number is much higher. That's 6 billion records in the last 12 months that have been lost. And that doesn't include, let's say, the latest, biggest one last week. And the average cost is $3.6 million per breach, not to mention what happens to your credibility, what happens to your install base, your executives. And then the most egregious part of it is that the post-mortem says that 78% of the breaches were considered low difficulty. So that basically means someone stole your creds, or you had bad creds, or you didn't know what was running from a backdoor vulnerability perspective. So when you think about, oh my gosh, look at all of these things running all over these different landscapes, and all of the different things that are running inside of them, and then you think about all of the news and the headlines that we've been seeing over the last 12, 24, 48 months, it kind of gets a little scary if you don't know what you're running. But wait, there's more. I think they asked this question in the keynote. How many people were surprised at least once in their life, or had a friend that was surprised once in their life by a public cloud bill? I know I have been. I know a lot of us have. And you can see why. It's easy to spin things up. In fact, this is a great little stat. There are 1.7 million different compute options to choose from in AWS alone. That's taking availability zones and regions and all the flavors and all of those other things into account. But oh my gosh, that's just compute. That's not storage. That's not networking. That's not anything up the stack. And that's only one cloud. So if cloud spending is going up to 70 billion by 2020, and most companies are overspending by 70%, and there's all these different options to spin up infrastructure and deploy applications, and there's a lot of risk associated with it, don't you think you should know what you're running? I think you should. I want to know. But then back to the traditional tools. So prior to Puppet, I worked at HP. They had a UMCDB product, just like every other big vendor. And I spent a lot of time working with people trying to record the OpenStack Nova events. I don't know, if anyone's familiar with OpenStack, you know that that's not a wise thing to do. But what they wanted to do is they wanted every state change to be recorded in their CMDB so they could prove audits. And not to mention, when you went to object storage and some of the network services, they wanted those recorded as well. Well, after a few weeks or months of trying to get 20-year-old technology to understand how to talk to API endpoints and deal with ephemeral infrastructure, and then saying that's not going to work, we decided there was a new challenge. The world has changed. We talked about it a lot in the keynotes. The tools that we had in our past may not be the best tools in our future. And they might not solve all of the different problems that we've described in terms of being short-lived infrastructure, public infrastructure, or hosted infrastructure. I mean, just take the average lifetime of a compute server. I think it's about 3 years. 3 years and change is what we were told when we were at HP. A VM is 6 months to a year, typically. And a container, it varies widely. But they could be a few minutes, could be a few seconds. Mostly it's within the weeks. But still, it's a lot of change. It's a lot of change and a lot of things being spun up and spun down, and these tools have a really hard time keeping up with them. So we decided to think about the problem a little differently. And a few years ago, I had an opportunity to go to Monorama in Portland, probably like 4 years ago now I think about it. And I got to sit and listen to some really, really smart people, way smarter than me, talk about how they were building systems management tools for Netflix, Google, AWS, Facebook, some of the largest scaled environments in the world. And they all had a very common pattern. And someone gave a great talk, and I actually don't remember who it is, but OODA stuck in my mind. So OODA is a decision framework. It was actually invented by the military. I think it was in the Vietnam War to basically help pilots associate with new jet, the jet combat. But the same premise applies to systems management. You first need to observe your situation. You need to know what's going on. And as we've talked about, there's a lot of different places that you can get that observation data from. But once you have all of that data, you have to orient to it. It doesn't do you any good that you have 14 different Nagios alarms going off, but really the root cause is something that's at the switch layer. So you have to orient to the context of the situation. And that's the hard part, because it requires a lot of different cross-pattern matching and data analysis, and really just some good old-fashioned history and experience and context. And then once you have oriented to that situation, then you just make a decision and you act. It's just that simple, right? No, not really. But you basically form a hypothesis, as we've all done, right? And my hypothesis used to be in the form of runbook entries. And then after we executed them multiple times, they became law, and then they just repeated over time. So we wanted to take a similar approach with a new style of discovery in our product. We wanted to take this observe, orient, and decide act decision framework and use that as our design principles for building this product out. Because it's really about all of the different scale options and ephemerality and the public and the private infrastructures that we've described before. And it just required a new way of thinking about things. So that leads us to this. Discovery leads to insights, which leads to better management. OODA was a little too complicated, honestly. So this is a little simpler. So essentially what we're saying here is that we want to provide you all with a very turnkey, lightweight experience to discover not only cloud-native infrastructure services or cloud services, but your traditional infrastructure as well, because as we all know, we're living in the hybrid world. I think half the room went up with containers, half the other room went with public cloud. I'm sure you all would raise your hands if I said who has a data center or on-prem. You got to manage all these things. It's not just about one or the other. But discovery isn't just enough, right? It's great, it's cool. It's really nice to see the dashboard pop up with blinky lights, and Canis will show you all kinds of cool things. But it's really about the insights that you're deriving from those things that you're discovering. And insights, self-admittedly, is somewhat of a loaded term. So what do we mean when we say insights? Well, things like package advisory services. So we now know not only what resources are running where and who's running them, but what are the packages running inside of them. And if we overlay that with maybe a CVE or some sort of other authoritative data source, all of a sudden it starts to become really interesting. Like, here are your resources that you didn't know were running in a public cloud that are on an out-of-date package that have a vulnerability that you might want to remediate. That seems pretty interesting. There's also optimization. We talked about the spend. We talked about the sprawl. In a past life, I worked at a public cloud. There was one dev team who thought they had it all automated and all down, and every time they tore down their dev environment, they forgot to stop their load balancers. So after about 3 weeks, they had 500 load balancers running in their dev environment, and they said, oh my gosh, what is this bill? What are we doing with 500 load balancers? And essentially, all they would have had to done is just do their inventory and figure out that those things aren't getting spun down when they crush those dev environments. But it's not just that. What we really want to get into here is to start to make recommendations. We want to make your lives a lot easier. We want to learn from the data. We want to learn from those patterns. Like I said, creating runbooks was interesting. Automating those runbooks became even more interesting. But now let's start grouping those things together. And with our new introduction of things like Bolt or tasks or PE tasks, you can start to see the power here. You can start to automate all of the different things that you're seeing in your infrastructure basically through those action engines. And that leads us to action, which is Puppet. And I don't need to talk any more about Puppet. You're all here. You all know about that. But essentially, if 10 years ago, Puppet redefined how systems management and configuration management was performed, now we're talking about redefining it again. Because you have to use data. It's a data problem in your infrastructure management environment. And if you're not using data to drive your insight or to drive your action, then you might be doing it wrong. So introducing Puppet Discovery. It's an agentless service discovery tool. Currently, it's in tech preview. It's available today. 6 a.m. this morning, I think we got the live website up, so I'll share the link later. And it's really focused especially on Amazon EC2 containers and physical hosts. So we wanted to blend some of the traditional cloud and cloud-native services into a technical preview offering so we could learn as much as possible. It instantly allows you to bring your unmanaged resources under Puppet management. I think if you were in the keynote, you saw a demo that showed that. But essentially, you'll be able to see all of the things that you haven't brought under management, and with a few clicks of a button, install the agent, and now they're under Puppet management. It's also a new experience. So if you're familiar with Puppet's experience of the past, this doesn't look like that. So we worked with all of our talented UX team, which I think I see some of them back there, to design an intuitive interface that it lets you browse or search across multiple resource pools and lets you pivot down into the depths of the things running on them. And of course, it's delivered as a turnkey service and an auto-updating experience. Omri did a good job describing how it's a containerized appliance, kind of using Kubernetes, and that we have this thing called Live Update that we actually pushed, I think, this morning, so it'll be a little different than the demo you saw in the keynote. And we continue to plan weekly or bi-monthly releases. So new features show up. There's no upgrade path. There's no taking 3 weeks to certify the new deployment's going to work. There's no, hopefully, quality assurance, because it all has been done for you by us. And really, it's just another way to get you up and running as fast as possible and let you focus on the things that you need to focus on and not upgrading your infrastructure tooling. But that's not all. So the other difference and fundamental change in terms of traditional tools and where we are today are, it's all about the platform, right? The platform. So discovery is really wrapped, it's an experience wrapped on top of what we call our data platform. And the reason we call it a data platform is because it's not just a data store. We're not just collecting data. We actually have it wrapped with an API and an SDK. And we do that for multiple reasons. One, we want to make sure that resource providers, cloud providers, infrastructure providers, can self-opt into foraging their own infrastructure. So very similar to what we have in Forge in the modules, you will see modules coming out that essentially from our other partners, such as Google, in terms of being able to self-forage their cloud infrastructure based on the API and the collection that surrounds our data platform. But it doesn't stop just there. We also want to grow our ISV ecosystem. We are not in the business of taking over everything in the world. We're not a security company. We're not a cost or billing company, right? We are a configuration management company. And we think that our data is valuable, but it's only valuable in conjunction with others. So we want to broaden our ecosystem to partners such as Qualys or Tenable, as well as other security firms. We've already talked a lot about our integrations with Splunk earlier today and at the Splunk Conf, and I think there's more talks. But we want to grow this infrastructure because it's about the data. We want to make the data as valuable as possible. And we know that we're not going to have all of the data, nor should we. So we want to extend that out to our partners and the ISVs. And we've talked about the experience and the user experience, but I'm going to let Kena show you what that looks like in the demo.
Thanks, Matt. All right. Doop. Haha. OK, that worked. Great. All right, live demos. This is going to be good. So this is Puppet Discovery. This is the dashboard. We talked a little bit about it in the keynote. Just to recap, we want to provide a single place that you can go to answer a number of different questions about your infrastructure. Things that were previously, maybe some of them might be easier questions than others, but taken together, we think that it's a unique source of information that we want your feedback to actually be able to put questions and answers up on this dashboard that would better help you do your jobs on an everyday basis. Things like, OK, how many servers do I have? Seems like a pretty simple question, except when you think about, oh, did that person just spin up AWS instances last week? Oh, I have that Amazon or that Azure account that has kind of been sitting there that I meant to try something out that I forgot to spin something down. In fact, like a couple weeks ago, I got an AWS bill for like 2 cents. And I went through every single region looking for where that 2 cents came from and couldn't find it. And I had to file a support ticket. And it was like a random EBS volume that I had forgotten to delete. And it's an easy problem when it's 2 cents. It's a more difficult problem when that number is a lot bigger. And what we hope is that with Puppet Discovery, we'll be able to start answering those questions and helping you actually find what you have. So questions like, what percentage of my servers are actually on-prem versus in public cloud? Today, we support AWS. Tomorrow, we're going to support other large cloud providers, including GCP, Azure, vSphere, we consider a cloud provider, and others. Things like, what percentage of my machines actually have a Puppet agent installed? How do I ensure that that number is always 100%? These are the types of questions that we hope to be able to answer for you in a very easy way using the tool like Puppet Discovery. So similar to what we did earlier this morning, first we're going to start by adding some inventory. These are just our demo credentials, so don't go copying them. They'll be gone very soon. Why does it correct to was? What if I do this? OK. Demo credentials. Nope. My fingers get really jittery when I'm on stage. OK. Bazam. So what's happening right now is that we're going and using those credentials to talk to the AWS API. We're going and collecting all of the different servers from all of the different regions. If you've ever had the experience of trying to click into multiple different regions to find all the stuff, hopefully we help to solve that problem for you. There were only a couple machines in that AWS account. So we can see that the dashboard's now updated. Without an agent, we actually go and talk to those machines and request for the resources that are running on them. And you can think of this as our VP of engineering likes to say, as a series of Russian dolls. That first, we're going and finding all of the different machines that are in your AWS environment. Then we sort of take that next level and we say, OK, well, what are the resources running on those machines? And then say if we find a container running, we can even look into the container and take that next level of introspection to say, OK, what are the actual packages and things running on my containers? And so for example, I have now an ability to see, OK, what are the most popular containers that are running across my infrastructure? And in this case, if I click down into here, we can see here's all of the containers across every single host that I have, all put together in a single place. And the idea being that we want to provide levels of click down that are click down into the data so you can get more insight into it without, as one of our UX architects terms, pathological levels of click down. We just want enough click down that you can actually get more information about this system. So I'm going to pick an example here. I'm going to go down to one of these that I spun up before. And I'm going to pick my web app demo. And what we also provide by now, because we can introspect containers, and we can also associate the resources that we find on those containers with resources that we find in other places in my infrastructure. For example, if I have a particular package that has been on my infrastructure, on my container, then I'm able to actually see where does that package exist everywhere else. So we can see, hey, actually, there's a lot of these servers and a lot of these other types of resources, whether they're servers, whether they're VMs, whether they're containers, that also contain the same package. And so if you sort of take that one concept and you expand it to the entire world of resources that you now have a graph of resources that you're able to navigate in this way, treating all resources as sort of first-class citizens that you should then be able to take actions with using some of the tools that we talked about earlier. So as an example of what might happen if you have a bunch of containers running and you previously didn't have a set of tools like this, that say I am, take off my product manager hat and put on my sort of wily hacker hat. I have my EC2 management console here. And I'm going to look at this Docker Engine 009 machine that was running that container earlier. I'm going to SSH into this host here. So I have this here. Am I in? Oh, yeah, I'm here. So can everyone see that? Is that better? Show everyone what I'm running. I'm basically running a very simple web application that has two containers that are supporting that application and a load balancer that's diverting traffic between the two of them. If I actually go to this URL, I can see that now you can see that the traffic's actually balancing between each one of these two hosts. Now, if I'm a wily hacker and I do something to one of these containers, you may not find out about it until much later. So by show of hands, how many people run containers today? And to keep your hands up, how many of those people run them with the read-only flag turned on in Docker? So like 1 or 2 of you. That is a really good indication of the fact that we think of containers as being immutable because the images are immutable, but we don't actually run them as immutable containers. We run them as just other types of things that are in our environments. And so what happens is that, say someone actually gets onto this box and runs a very sophisticated simulate hack like this, that suddenly you may end up with something like this. And you didn't even know it. And it won't be obviously someone who puts their picture there. It'll be someone who changes something very mysterious and cryptic on your system. And you may not find out about it until a lot later. And so what we hope to be able to do with Puppet Discovery is as we go back to our Puppet Discovery and we go find that instance again, that we provide actually the ability that we shipped in the tool that we shipped earlier this year called Lumagon, which actually provides a way to inspect the running containers on your system and detect when files have changed between the container image that was originally deployed and the actual running container. So what we find here, as we see in our changed files, that, hey, look, someone added this mysterious index.html thing that, as well as this whatever this wannacrypt.exe file is on my containers, and I may want to do something about that. I may want to take some action on that. So we also want to provide you a better way to take action. And so that's the third part of not only just discovering your containers, not just discovering your infrastructure, not even just getting insight into those types of, getting insight into your containers, the security vulnerabilities that might exist there, but also to be able to then use that insight to drive better action, to drive better management. And this morning in the keynote, you saw that one example of that management was the ability to actually install Puppet agents. In the future, we're going to be adding a lot more types of capabilities. But one of them might be building building a Docker image. So I might want to provide the path to my so in this case, that when someone had broken into that machine or broken into the VM, had gone into that container, had modified it, I might want to go in and detect that and rebuild the image and sort of redeploy it everywhere. The only step that I need to do necessarily on my end is to rebuild the image, which then will be automatically deployed in my CI/CD toolchain. So in this example, I'm going to my lib modules web app demo. And I'm going to not provide a tag, Docker. That's fine. And then I'm going to scroll down here and then apply this to my Docker builder machine, which will actually go and kick off that task on the Docker image builder that we use, which then creates a new Docker image which doesn't have that, which sort of makes it pristine. Hopefully, will actually set the read-only flag, and then runs a task to be able to actually remediate that vulnerability. So what we see, just to recap, is the ability to discover all types of infrastructure. In this morning, you saw EC2 instances. Now you see containers. We'll be adding to this list as we go on. The ability to get insight about not only the types, the differences, and the differentiation of OSs in your environment, of container images, of other types of resources, but also the ability to actually detect security vulnerabilities, the ability to drive those insights that you get into better management, into actions that you can actually take using a tool like Discovery, and then in combination of Discovery and a tool like Tasks or a tool like Puppet Enterprise, and be able to have a much more complete and a much more a management framework that allows you to take into account the fact that all these things are shifting, that all these things are changing, that the lifetime of the containers might just be seconds, might be just minutes. And that's sort of what we hope for Puppet Discovery. Going back to my slides here.
Thanks, Kenneth. That was pretty awesome, and I didn't know you were a hacker.
I didn't know either.
So what's next? As we talked about, we're going to broaden the number of supporting resources to include VMware, Google, Azure, and more. We're actually going to roll this out as a consumable service as well. So that's a multi-tenant service that Puppet will host and manage for you. Usage-based consumption. So you have the flexibility of basically consuming it as a service or deploying it as a software appliance. We're going to go deep on the insights that Puppet Discovery provides for containers and distributed platforms. So we just scratched the surface in terms of the things that we're discovering and what we can do with them. And then, as Kane has talked about, we're actually working with a few partners and doing some early validations around doing package advisory services and remediation of potential vulnerabilities. And of course, we're going to extend the ISV ecosystem, because we don't want to do this by ourselves. We think that we're stronger and better together. So we encourage you to get hands-on with Puppet Discovery. It's available today at that URL. We all downloaded it and installed it early this morning. It takes about 10-ish minutes or so to kind of get all the kubectl stuff kind of installed, but it'll get fired up there. We also have a live demo in our demo section out in that hall, I think, right next door. And we've got some prototypes and some future feature sets that we'd love to get your opinion on and validate with you. So with that, I thank you for your time. And I'll open it up for questions. Do we have a mic, or how do we want to do questions? Go ahead and just.
So I have a question. We have a lot of AWS accounts, and you're talking about putting in that key. Are you going to be able to? Will you be able to connect to multiple accounts?
Yes, the answer is.
How do you go about this? Is there going to be like a drop down, or are they just going to put them all together?
Well, ultimately, we'd love for you to be able to upload something or do it in an automated fashion, but it would be some sort of batch upload. We won't want you typing in 500 users that are associated to 30 different AWS credentials. For the tech preview, we basically made it pretty simple.
We also use assumed credentials. We don't use access keys. We do not put those out there.
Okay.
Is that something that this is going to support, assuming credentials?
Yeah, in the future, we want a much better way than copy pasting from VS Code into the browser. And one of those ways is assigning an IAM role to it and saying, okay, then you can also control permissions on that role. So you can say, well, you just want to allow Discovery to read a bunch of stuff, but not actually take action. We want to be able to provide you those options.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, hi. You mentioned integration with VMware. Does that include vRealize and vCenter, or just one of those two?
So we're just kicking off our integration with VMware. It would be a vCenter integration that basically takes the VM inventory and the configurations and then forges that into our data platform and then displays it alongside all of the other infrastructure services.
So no plans for vRealize integration yet?
Let's talk after that. We haven't made a decision.
Hi, you said you had plans for VMware. Do you have any plans for Red Hat or Rev or OpenStack integration?
Open what? No, I'm just kidding. OpenStack? Yes. So essentially, what was before OpenStack? Sorry.
Rev. It's our virtualization stack.
So that one we haven't really talked about so much. I'd love to understand some of your use cases and what you're thinking there. OpenStack is absolutely on the roadmap, and it gets to the self-foraging piece. So honestly, we want to get to that self-foraging collector, right? And then we can then partner that out and build them out ourselves as well. So absolutely, good question. I think there's a question over here.
So when you're running discovery of things like packages and on the host, rather than just like the AWS inventory, what are the requirements to already exist on the machine in order to have that discovery function?
So we copy a very small binary onto the machine and do all of it's a self-contained binary. It's a little Go binary. So that enables us to not have to rely on Ruby being installed on the machine, not having a Puppet agent there, those types of things. And that was one of the key design principles.
So a lot of people running containers are using an orchestration engine on top, and I saw the demo here was one host, a couple of containers.
Yep.
What are the plans to integrate with an orchestration engine so that we actually get meaning out of this container relates to that container on another host?
You want to take that? You want to take that one?
Sure. We absolutely want to support Kubernetes. We're built on Kubernetes. The idea that we wouldn't be able to forage the services and pods and other types of resources that are running on those platforms is ludicrous. So we want to support Kubernetes, Docker Swarm, whatever Nomad, whatever you want to use, we want to provide the tools to harvest those resources and pull those into the Discovery platform.
Yeah, I mean, we look at the world of heterogeneous management, right? I mean, there's tons of tools, tons of schedules, tons of automation platforms. We want to work better with them. We're not trying to supersede anything like Kubernetes. We wouldn't be foolish to try to do that, but we want to make the experience better. And the integration paradigm that we have, I think we feel pretty comfortable we can do that. Zach?
What is the licensing like? Is it enterprise only or what?
So today it's a tech preview. It's free. Go pull it down. It's awesome. Going forward, we're going to look for a GA, of course, early next year. It'll be a separate product from Puppet Enterprise, and we haven't really figured out how they are bundled together or anything of that nature. And I'm always interested in hearing opinions about that, but it'll be a separate product.
Yeah, specifically things that would make it a problem to purchase, we want to hear about. So definitely provide us that feedback.
Yep.
Hi, does Discovery support network devices or just on the compute side?
So right now, sorry, I'm squinting because there's you don't know how bright the light is right there. So right now, it's very focused on compute, and we want to broaden that out to other storage and network services. We have heard loud and clear from a lot of you that there is a desperate need to broaden our reach to network devices. As you all know, that's a very large world, and we're working with some of our customers to define or determine what are the most value we can provide versus going broad against the entire ecosystem. I'd love to talk with you afterwards and understand what network devices you're trying to manage. Yes?
We currently use ServiceNow Discovery to get all the information from CMDB.
Mm-hmm.
Is it on the roadmap? Is there a roadmap for the integration of Puppet Discovery with ServiceNow Discovery?
Yeah, that's a great question. Honestly, our roadmap only goes to GA, and we plan to learn a lot from you all. So the answer is maybe. Currently, we don't have a roadmap item committed to go and integrate with ServiceNow, but we've heard a lot. A lot of people have that same question, and it's something we need to evaluate. Sure. Oh, sorry. I just answer. I don't tell people to.
It's a follow-on to the multiple accounts question at the beginning. Each of my product teams have a decentralized instance of our platform to kind of concentrate all their monitoring and their tooling like this. But as the owner of the platform, I want to have an overhead kind of God's eye view of the whole thing. Do you have any intention to support a kind of a federated approach to seeing the whole kind of picture?
The short answer is yes. We need a federated identity model to hook into the enterprise corporate directories as well as the cloud provider directories. As Kanan said earlier, we have a lot of work to do on our identity model, but that is the intent, yes.
So kind of a simple question. While you're out there discovering stuff, obviously they did the demonstration with Shadow IT, and Shadow IT doesn't necessarily give out their credentials to people. So when your machine discovers machines that doesn't know how to get into, what does it display? How does it help us to figure out what's on there?
Yeah, I mean, obviously we can't connect to AWS's APIs if we don't have the credentials.
We will show the fact that those machines exist in the AWS account, and we will also show that we can't talk to them. So we won't be able to find packages, users, and groups on those, but we should actually be able to harvest the tags associated with those VMs and be able to at least show you some information that we know that they're there, but we won't be able to go that next level deeper without having credentials to the box.
And speaking of credentials, what permissions do the access key pair need to be able to gather and install?
I mean, the ones that we use are just obviously blanket keys to the entire account. You would at least need read access to. No, you also need. Let's talk after. I have to figure out open up my EC2 portal and see exactly what I've added. But yeah, like the ones we've configured are obviously to the entire account. Yeah.
Thanks for the demo, guys. As far as discovery, how does it happen within like an on-prem data center? Like, how do you scope out what needs to be discovered?
Yeah.
So it's a software appliance that you would run on your in your infrastructure. We would have to have a listener on the network segments that you want to discover against, and then it just works as we described here. I don't know if you have a deeper question or.
Well, I think today, right now, for the on-prem part, you have to supply the list of nodes, and we do the next level of foraging to find the packages and the resources on those. But to Matt's point, we're trying to figure out how do we actually. I think very few network administrators just want us to run Nmap against their subnets. So what are the right ways that we can actually get at that? We're still exploring that.
Any other questions? OK. Well, thank you very much. Yeah. Please let us know how you think this thing works, and we look forward to hearing from you. So awesome, guys. Thank you. Appreciate it.